If you hear mysterious noises and sounds, if you hear your name called when there's no one around, keep going, dear listener. This story is for you. I hope it will accomplish what I wrote it to do. In these words, you will find all the tools you'll need, so that when you're faced with unimaginable things, you won't react with fear, as most people do. You'll be equipped, calm, and able to see the truth. My best, Hedy. This is What We Keep Hidden. By Lauren Nicole. Chapter 19. Tears. My coat pockets weighed heavily on my body as I made my way up the stairs. Slowly, I lifted each foot, determined to get to Betty, even as my muscles struggled against the density of the supplies that occupied my usually feather-light raincoat, now full of flashlights, batteries, candles, and the two-way radios I found. My head pounded with each step. I could hear Lucy's frantic barks in the distance. She's in the parlor. Oh, I told her Betty can't move. Betty's frantic screams reached my ears soon after.
Hedy! Oh my God. Answer me!
I'm here! I yelled back.
Oh, thank God. I've been yelling my lungs out with no answer from you. And this dog! She won't quit yelling at me.
I slowly climbed the remaining steps. Using the frame of the doorway as an anchor, I pulled myself up into the main house. Lucy had bounded up to me as soon as I reached the top of the stairs and helped me into the parlor. I got quite a shock down there. Residual electricity from the lightning strike, I think.
Oh, my dear. Come, sit down. Quickly. Are you hurt?
No. I mean, not from the shock. Triggered an episode, though. Went down like a load of bricks. Knocked my head pretty good. I brought my hand to the sore spot at the back of my skull and winced. Sitting on the coffee table, I rested my elbows on my knees and took Betty's hands into mine. But Betty, I have to talk to you.
Later, kid. You need to rest.
No, Betty, seriously, I insisted.
Goodness. Okay. You're making me a little nervous, kid.
When I was down there, in the basement, I saw something. Well, two somethings. Betty's demeanor changed instantly. Her body tightened, her shoulders pulled back, and her head tilted, eyeing me carefully. I know I saw Jimmy. Your Jimmy. Betty inhaled sharply at my mentioning his name, but I pushed through. And Clark?
No, Hedy, now you listen to me. You did not see them. It's only your imagination, and it's all my fault.
Betty's voice faltered as tears quivered on the edge of her eyelids.
It's my fault you think you saw them. I couldn't keep myself from talking about them. Stupid Betty.
Her head fell into her hands.
This house.
Her muffled voice continued through her fingers.
It's not safe. It taunts and tricks you. It makes you think things are there when they're not. That's why I spend so much time in the garden or the porch. When you came here, I so appreciated your company. I selfishly thought if you stayed outside, you'd be safe.
Betty, please, just listen. It's not a dream or a hallucination. They interacted with me. I spoke to them in the basement. All summer, I've been trying to collect data on how it's even been possible. I frantically took my notebook out of my pocket and flipped to the drawing of Jimmy. The dowsing rods, my EMF measurements, I can't explain it, Betty, But that doesn't mean it isn't happening. Please, Betty, listen. The more I tried to convince Betty, the more she retreated into her denial. When she finally spoke, it erupted from her with the rage and despair she had held on to all of these years.
No, Hedy, you listen. This house taunts you with your pain. When Jimmy died, Clark and I, we couldn't bear it. No parent should ever bury their child, she sobbed. We lost him so fast once he got sick. We barely had any time to wrap our heads around what was happening. Then with the war, Clark was called and...
Betty fell to pieces in her hands. I rushed as fast as I could to sit at her side and placed a hand gently on her shoulder, just like she had comforted me so many times before. Betty, if that were true, I explained gently, I wouldn't be able to see Jimmy and Clark. I'd see the bullies from my old school. Your pain isn't my pain. The house isn't torturing you. Betty muttered inaudibly from behind her hands. Now, I was truly afraid of the floodgates I had opened. I didn't know how to reason with her, how to show her the logical progression of events. I was in the deep water of Betty's heartache, and I couldn't see how to get us both back to shore.
It was too much. It's all just been too much for my heart to bear.
I looked up in despair and saw another, smaller hand reach up towards Betty's shoulder. The cold, dark, and shadowy appearance of this hand didn't frighten me anymore. I knew it was Jimmy's. Looking up, I saw Clark slowly materialize, joining us on the other side of Betty. He placed his hand on her other shoulder. Betty, I whispered, they're here now. Betty continued to sob into her hands.
Nope, they left me. They left me here, all alone, a long, long time ago.
No, Betty, I never left your side. Clark's gruff, deep voice echoed around the parlor.
Clark?
Betty's hands fell as she looked up with immense hope in her eyes. I'm here. I've always been.
Me too, Mom. Haven't you seen my airplane moving around? You never play with me anymore.
Jimmy? My Jimmy? The airplane?
Betty laughed through her tears.
Oh, I'm so sorry, baby. I thought I was imagining it move. I should have known it was you.
Betty was still crying, but these tears were different than the ones before. With each tear that fell, both of the entities transformed. Their ghostly, shadow-like figures, cloaked in mystery, now looked almost human again. Clark and Jimmy looked no different than Betty and I, save for one striking detail. They glowed. A beautiful, warm, golden glow emanated from their beings. The way bubbles look, catching the rays of a warm summer sun as they dance through the air. Peaceful, delicate, and full of joy. The love they emanated was palpable and pulsating throughout the room. Betty seemed to have a sense of peace floating around her as she basked in the love of her family once again. With a content smile, I left the room to give the reunited family some privacy. I had no rational explanation for what was happening, and for the first time in my life, I was okay with it. Some things were beyond reason, but that didn't make the experience any less real or valid. I was walking into the hallway, lost in thought, when...
Betty? Betty?
A muffled voice urgently came through the door. I ran to the front door and swung it open. Mrs. Mom! I threw my arms around her. She was soaking wet.
Oh, my babes, I was so worried,
she whispered as she hugged me tightly and cradled the back of my head with her hand.
Ow, 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 ow.
I winced from the pain of the lump on my head.
What's wrong? Are you hurt?
With her hands on my shoulders, she pushed me back to inspect me up and down. It's nothing. Just a little bump on the head from earlier. Come in, I beckoned.
Are you kidding?
A hit on the head is never nothing, she scolded. Let me see. Where's Betty? Is she okay? Mrs. Mom hurled her questions at me as soon as she came into the house. No, she hurt her knee coming up the stairs. The storm caught us while we were out in the garden. I was rushing to put everything away, and by the time we made it to the porch, it was a downpour. She slipped on a puddle on the stairs, I explained. Ugh, good thing I came when I did. I knew it. I just knew something had happened. I rushed over when I didn't hear from you. Mrs. Mom rushed into the parlor to find Betty. I hurried after her, nervous about the scene we would find when we entered, especially since Mrs. Mom went first. Oh, Betty, are you okay? Mrs. Mom asked. I looked up, cautiously, only to spot Betty sitting exactly where I'd left her, smiling as tears streamed down her face.
Oh, my dear, I'm better than I've been in years,
Betty remarked through her laughter. Hedy told me about your knee, Mrs. Mom probed, confused with Betty's demeanor.
Oh, yes, pish-posh,
Betty answered, waving her hands dismissively.
I'll be right as rain in the morning.
Even so, I'd feel more comfortable if we took you in to get it looked at, Mrs. Mom urged as she sat on the coffee table next to Betty.
Oh, if that'd make you happy, dear, who am I to argue?
Betty's bliss bubbled effervescently through her words.
But I must say, you don't look so great yourself,
Betty joked. Mrs. Mom sure was a sight. She resembled a cat that had just been dunked in a bucket of water.
Ugh, she groaned. You'd never believe what I went through just to get here.
Did you walk here from the Grove? I asked, handing her a stack of fresh towels.
Almost,
she laughed. I was working in my office when I heard the first downpour. Obviously, I was a little worried, so I made sure I had the phone and the walkie-talkie nearby, she said, giving me a wink. When I didn't hear anything, I figured I'd come to check on you too. It would be faster and safer to drive here anyways. She looked at me pleadingly. Oh, I hoped you stayed put with that thunder and lightning. But I left the back door unlocked in case you were still outside, walking home. I got halfway here in the car, but then the floodwaters washed out the dirt road, and the tires got stuck in the mud. So I got out and half ran, half walked the rest of the way here.
What a journey,
Betty remarked. I know. I realize I can't move you yet, but I ran into Audrey on the way. She came out of the market when she saw my car get stuck. She's calling a tow truck, and I told her I was on my way here. Once everything's situated, we'll take you over to the clinic and get your knee checked out. Well, Betty said, slapping her thigh, then wincing from the pain.
Oh, I certainly see where Hedy gets her decisiveness from. I can't argue with a great plan like that. For now, though, why don't you go upstairs and change out of those wet clothes? Hedy?
I answered. Be a dear. Show your mother to my closet? Sure thing, I smiled.
Put on whatever you like, dear,
Betty said, turning to Mrs. Mom. Will you be okay down here? Mrs. Mom asked.
Oh, my dear,
Betty reassured her.
I am so much better than okay.
Thanks to your marvelous little one here. Mrs. Mom nodded and made her way towards the hallway. Betty gave me a wink. As I left the room, I caught a slight sparkle and a golden glimmer out of the corner of my eye. I no longer worried about Betty being alone in this house, because now I knew she never would be.
Hey there.
it's Hedy. Do you want to join our H&B secret society? I might even be able to convince Betty to share her famous butterfly PT recipe with you. We'll see about that. For now, head on over to laurennicole.art/stories to see how you can get your official member badge. See you soon. Thank you for joining us on this episode of What We Keep Hidden. Tune in next time to see what happens. What We Keep Hidden is written, narrated, and produced by Lauren Nicole. This has been a Lauren Nicole creation.